Today, bananas are the most commonly consumed fruit in the United States, followed by apples and grapes. The average American eats about 27 pounds of bananas every year, which is about 90 bananas a year. Despite their current popularity, a little over 100 years ago, American fruit companies had to convince people to eat the fruit from Central America. To protect their crops, these companies frequently called in the United States military in what historians now call the Banana Wars. Most people have never heard of the Banana Wars. Most people would also think it's strange for the United States to spend over 30 years in conflict over bananas. They may be tasty and famous, but on the surface, they hardly seem worth the military conflict. However, the Banana Wars were about much more than fruit. The Banana Wars were a series of interventions the United States launched in Central America from 1898 to 1934. Although American produce companies helped goad these interventions along anytime they felt their production was being opposed, the United States also had political reasons for wanting to control Central America. Most of the countries were much smaller than America, making it easier for the United States to be bossy. It was willing to use its superior position to secure the Panama Canal, which was essential as America became a significant international maritime power. While occupying various countries, such as Cuba, Nicaragua, Haiti, and the Dominican Republic, United States soldiers built infrastructure like roads and schools. They also helped with disease control while killing thousands of rebels. The Banana Wars were complicated, and as the world continues to push for an international community, it's time to examine these political and military interventions in Central America. By reviewing how bananas shaped an entire hemisphere, we can understand today's complex relationship between the United States and the Central American countries. What were the causes of the Banana Wars? Although historians say the Banana Wars started in 1898, the United States had been launching military interventions into Central America long before that. In fact, the United States had already developed a history for interventions across the globe, despite the popular opinion that the United States was more isolationist in its early history. The Banana Wars were different from these earlier incidents because the Banana Wars were fueled by a relationship between American businesses in Central America and the United States government's willingness to send in the Marines upon request. The main antagonist of this series of conflicts was the United Fruit Company, which eventually created a subsidiary called Vaccaro Brothers Company, which later became Dole Fruit Company. The United Fruit Company became powerful by creating a vertical monopoly. It used ruthless techniques to eliminate competitors, even calling on local governments to break labor strikes or unionization attempts. The company was known to use bribes, hire mercenaries, and even fund rebellions. But the most significant threat was to call in the United States Marines. Growing bananas was an expensive investment. Just building the plantations required a significant amount of money. The company had to acquire land, either renting or purchasing, clear the land, build all necessary infrastructure, including housing and helping with the railroads and ports, and actually grow the crop. Of course, long-term success also depended upon a friendly relationship with the national leaders, and the governments in Central America were prone to unrest. Some leaders were supportive, others were interested in a more significant profit. When local riots or wars broke out, the United Fruit Company's investments in infrastructure and laborers were often threatened. As a result, the United Fruit Company tended to call upon the United States Marines to protect their profits. However, the United Fruit Company was not the only corporation calling for Western military support. That phenomenon extended to other fruit companies as well as sugar plantations, gold mines, shipping lines, and railroads. American companies were also not the only ones calling for military intervention. Other Western countries like France, Germany, and Britain had companies in Central America that did the same thing. Of course, there were other reasons the United States military intervened so frequently in Central America during the Banana Wars that do not relate to fruit. Instead, they focused on curbing German naval explorations and building a canal to connect the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans to better support the United States Navy. Multiple places in Central America could have supported a canal to connect the two oceans, but because the region is shaped like a twisted V, most experts at the time identified Panama as the superior location. While it offered great military opportunities, it also was important for trade. which became evident during the 1848 gold rush in California. The fastest and safest way to get gold from California was to take a ship from New Orleans to Panama, cross over, and sail up to California. Even after the Transcontinental Railway opened in 1869 and cut travel to California from months to days, shipping by sea was still cheaper. So protecting and maintaining the Panama Canal remained essential to the American military and economy. There was another cause behind the Banana Wars, one that had nothing to do with bananas or the economy. In 1823, President James Monroe put forth the Monroe Doctrine, which heavily influenced American international politics for years. It stated the United States would not tolerate new European colonies in the Americas, although previously established ones would be acknowledged. As the United States grew, it became more capable of fulfilling the Monroe Doctrine. In 1904, President Theodore Roosevelt amended the Monroe Doctrine with the Roosevelt Corollary. Roosevelt stated the United States had the right to intervene in any American country as necessary. It also warned European nations to keep their interventions out of the Americas. This political situation helped the United States justify the Banana Wars, whether or not the Central American countries appreciated the United States' involvement. What were some of the interventions the United States made in Central America that did not involve bananas during the Banana Wars? Panama was one of the most famous Central American regions to see American military intervention during the Banana Wars. As the narrowest point in Central America, Panama had long been essential to trade as people moved goods across the land. However, the area had never been truly populated. Diseases like yellow fever and malaria were common in the swamps, and the region was nearly impossible to reach over land. A few indigenous people lived traditional lives there, but settlers were not generally successful. American interest in Panama began long before the Banana Wars, but it took on renewed interest with the California Gold Rush in 1848. Investors started by building the Panama Railroad, which made its first complete journey in January 1855. Americans began pouring into Panama on the way to California, which encouraged tensions between the two groups. Sadly, these were not the only issues in Panama. The region was part of Colombia at the time and saw numerous coups and impacts of civil war. Panama was filled with political unrest and even eventually declared its independence from Colombia. However, it wasn't tensions in Central America or even promises of gold that finally pushed the United States to finish the Panama Canal. It was American tensions with the Spanish. After the Spanish-American War, President Theodore Roosevelt was determined to have a canal so that the U.S. Navy could shift warships more quickly, increasing national security. He convinced the United States to finish the Panama Canal with the promise of better commerce and increased military protection. Interestingly, they had not started it. It was begun by a Frenchman named Ferdinand de Lesseps in 1880, but he could not finish it because he ran out of funding. The Americans used some of the machinery he left behind when they took over the building site. The United States signed a treaty with Panama to gain the rights to the canal once it became independent, striking a significant win for the Americans in the Banana Wars. One of the most powerful Central American nations during the Banana Wars was Nicaragua, despite its small size. The United States had been involved in Nicaragua long before the Banana Wars through building canals and even attempting colonization in the 1850s. American colonization was unsuccessful, and Nicaragua continued growing into its own culture. They had a strong dictator from 1893 to 1909 named José Santos Zelaya. He was a more liberal dictator, focusing on infrastructure. However, he opposed the Panama Canal, maintaining that a canal through Nicaragua would be better. He even opened communications with Germany and Japan about using Nicaragua's water routes for a canal, which only increased hostilities between Nicaragua and the United States. When Zelaya was toppled in a rebellion, the United States finally intervened. The Banana Wars in Nicaragua were the most intense out of all the interventions in Central America, as the United States Marines battled rebels and political instability for years. One of the less involved countries in the Banana Wars was Mexico, despite its lowlands ideally suited to growing bananas. Instead, one of Mexico's most famous American interventions did not involve bananas or United Fruit. It involved a Mexican Civil War and the port city of Veracruz. Mexico had a violent civil war from 1910 to 1920 called the Mexican Revolution. Mexican and American troops had already seen conflict along the border between the two countries, so tensions were high. In 1914, the Mexican authorities in Tampico, a growing port important to the oil industry, refused to offer a 21-gun salute as an apology for briefly arresting 8 American soldiers for potential trespassing, which aggravated an American admiral. In response, American troops landed in Veracruz, an important port slightly south of Tampico. The United States occupied the city for 7 months. The occupation damaged relations between Mexico and the United States. The United States intervened in many Central American countries throughout the Banana Wars. While each country has its own unique story from the conflict, the long-term results for Central America tend to see certain similarities that continue to impact their relations with the United States today. What were the results of the Banana Wars? There have been few positive long-term consequences of the Banana Wars. These conflicts were a time when American business people used the United States military as their musclemen, a term often used to describe organized crime. The ability to call in one of the strongest militaries in the Americas gave the companies unbeatable power to get what they wanted from Central America, regardless of the cost to the Central American people. Of course, not all the Banana War results were negative. American forces built schools, hospitals, bridges, and roads, and worked to improve public health in Central America. The United States military helped train paramilitary troops in several Central American countries, designing them to be politically neutral and act more like a national constabulary. Sadly, these paramilitary forces did not do so. They provided excellent platforms for future dictators, which have been an ongoing issue in Central America's recent history. Countries like the Dominican Republic, Nicaragua, and Haiti all suffered under cruel dictators after American forces pulled out in the 1900s, and the damage has impacted the development of Central America on the international level. Even though historians usually place the end of the Banana Wars in 1934 with the Good Neighbor policy, that was hardly the end of American intervention in Central America or even internationally. The United States military intervened in Central America during the second half of the 1900s over fears of communism, and there continue to be interventions in recent history. The Banana Wars left a lasting impact on the relationship between the United States and Central American countries. As Central America works to develop internationally, perhaps both sides can learn from the Banana Wars and move forward into the modern age. How would you like to get a deeper understanding of history, impress your friends, and predict the future more accurately based on past events? If this sounds like something you might be into, then check out the brand new Captivating History Book Club by clicking the first link in the description. To learn more about the Banana Wars, check out our book, The Banana Wars, a captivating guide to the interventions of the United States in Central America, Mexico, and the Caribbean. It's available as an ebook, paperback, and audiobook. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button and subscribe for more videos like this.